When someone dies, we lay them to rest. We hold funerals. We visit graves. We have a place to mourn, a place to remember, a place where our loved ones are finally at peace. This is considered a fundamental human right, the final dignity we owe to the dead and to those they leave behind. But for the families in these cases, the greatest threat didn't come from the violence itself. It came from the calculated decision to make their loved ones vanish completely. Ship stewards who disposed of victims in the ocean. Business partners who fed remains to animals. Kidnappers who buried bodies where they would never be discovered. These weren't impulsive crimes or accidents covered up in panic. These were methodical erasures designed to destroy evidence and deny families the most basic closure. They destroyed not just lives, but the ability to grieve properly, to have funerals, to visit graves. And the courts made sure that belief became their downfall. British prosecutors have been convicting murderers without recovered remains since 1947, building cases on circumstantial evidence, forensic breakthroughs, and lies that eventually collapse. Today we're covering 10 UK killers whose victims were never found, from the 1947 Porthole murder to a 2022 conviction that came 46 years after the crime. What you're about to hear will show you that justice doesn't require a body when the evidence speaks loud enough. You'll witness how killers learned that destroying evidence doesn't destroy the truth. Case 1. James Cwmdu. On October 17, 1947, a 21-year-old actress named Gay Gibson boarded the Union Castle Line ship MV Durban Castle in Cape Town, returning to London after a successful theatre tour in South Africa. She was travelling first class in cabin 126 on B deck, her ticket purchased by an admirer. In her belongings was a letter of introduction to a West End theatrical agent. She had performed lead roles alongside Doreen Mantle during her tour and served in the Auxiliary Territorial Service during the war. By sunrise on October 18th, Gay Gibson would be dead, her body pushed through a porthole into the Atlantic Ocean, 90 miles off the west coast of Africa. Gay Gibson's real name was Eileen Isabella Ronnie Gibson. She had no relationship with James Cwmdu, the 30-year-old deck steward working on the ship. Cwmdu had been born on December 16, 1916, in Waterfoot, Lancashire, and worked on cruise liners since age 17. He was married with a child. The crew called him Don Jimmy because of his pursuit of female passengers. 2 women had previously accused him of rape aboard ship. The company kept him employed anyway. During the early morning of October 18th, around 3 a.m, cabin 126's call system activated. Both the steward bell and stewardess bell lit up simultaneously. This was unusual. This suggested distress, someone trying to summon any help available. Duty watchman Frederick Steer responded and knocked. James Cwmdu opened the door part way, blocking the view inside, and said everything was all right. Steer left. Hours later, when stewardess Eileen Field checked the cabin, she found it empty. The porthole was open. Stains marked the sheets. Blood-tinged saliva was visible on the pillow. Gay Gibson was gone. The prosecution established what happened in that cabin. Cwmdu had entered during the night and attempted to rape Gay Gibson. She fought back and pressed both alarm bells. He strangled her to silence her, to stop her from bringing witnesses. Then he pushed her body through the porthole into the ocean. When Captain Arthur Patey investigated, Cwmdu lied, claiming he had never been in the cabin. Confronted with Steer's testimony, he changed his story and admitted being there. His words were revealing. "My wife can know nothing of this." Not concern for Gay Gibson, concern for his reputation. The ship's doctor found fresh scratch marks on Cwmdu's neck, shoulder and wrist. These were defensive injuries from someone fighting for her life. The cabin was sealed and its contents, including the porthole section, were transported to court as exhibits. Cwmdu changed his story 6 times before settling on his defence. They had consensual sex, she died suddenly from a seizure, he panicked and disposed of the body. Prosecutor G.D. Roberts KC posed the question that destroyed this defence. Why dispose of a body through a porthole if death was natural? Roberts argued that Cwmdu's decision could only have been motivated by the fear of the murderer disposing of the body, which was deadly evidence against him. The trial ran from March 18th to 22nd, 1948, at Hampshire Assizes in Winchester Castle, before Mr. Justice Hilbery. The defence brought witnesses who testified Gay Gibson had suffered from fainting episodes, suggesting natural death. But the scratches on Cam's body, the blood, the simultaneous alarm bells, and the disposal told a different story. They told the story of a young woman who fought back, who tried to call for help, and who was killed because she resisted. A jury of 3 women and 9 men deliberated for 45 minutes. On March 22, 1948, they returned a guilty verdict. James Camb was sentenced to death by hanging. Parliament was debating capital punishment abolition, and the Home Secretary had decided to commute all pending death sentences. On April 30th, 1948, Camb received a reprieve. His sentence became life imprisonment. Winston Churchill spoke in the Commons about the case. The Commons had saved the life of the brutal, lascivious murderer who thrust the poor girl he had raped and assaulted through a porthole. Camb's appeal was denied. He was released in September 1959 after 11 years, selling his story to the Sunday Pictorial. He never admitted murder. In 1967, 8 years after release, he was convicted of indecently assaulting a 13-year-old girl, followed by further offences against schoolgirls in Scotland. He returned to prison, was released in 1978, and died on July 7, 1979, of heart failure at age 62. Gay Gibson's body was never recovered from the Atlantic. Her mother attended the trial and said, "I am proud to be the mother of Gay Gibson, one of the finest types of English womanhood, physically, mentally, and morally." There was no grave to visit, no funeral, no place to lay flowers. There was only the certainty of what James Camb had done, preserved in a trial transcript that took 45 minutes to end with the word guilty. The case remains Britain's most famous no-body murder, known as the porthole murder. While James Camb disposed of his victim in the ocean where recovery was impossible, the next killer believed feeding remains to his pigs would erase all evidence. Case 2. Michael Onufrejczyk. In April 1953, a 57-year-old Polish war veteran named Stanislav Sikut invested approximately £600 to become business partners with another Polish veteran at Cwmdu farm near Cwmdu, Carmarthenshire, Wales. Sikut had survived both world wars and remained in Britain through the Polish Resettlement Corps. The £600 represented his life savings. He was looking for stability and security in his later years. By December, Stanislav Sikut would be dead, his remains never found. Michael Onufrejczyk was 58 years old in 1953. Born in Poland in 1895, he was a highly decorated warrant officer, wounded twice in World War I and holder of 9 gallantry medals from World War II. After settling in Wales, he purchased the near-derelict Cwmdu farm in 1949. Locals called him Mr. Whiskers, or the Butcher of Cwmdu. He kept to himself and had a reputation for a fiery temper. The partnership soured immediately. Within months, Sikut was complaining to police that Onufrejczyk was beating him. He consulted a solicitor about dissolving the arrangement. The terms were clear. Either Onufrejczyk bought out Sikut's £600 share, or the farm would be sold and proceeds split. Onufrejczyk could not afford the buyout and would not lose the farm. On December 14, 1953, a blacksmith saw Sikut for the last time when he brought a horse to be shod. The blacksmith completed the work. Sikut left, leading the horse back to Cwmdu farm. No one ever saw him alive again. Police concluded that when Sikut returned that afternoon, Onufrejczyk killed him in the kitchen, dismembered his body, and fed the remains to the pigs. When police arrived for routine checks on foreign nationals in late December, Onufrejczyk claimed Sikut had sold his farm share and returned to Poland. Red flags emerged immediately. Sikut had left £450 untouched in savings. Not a single friend knew he had plans to leave. And Onufrejczyk's story kept changing. Sikut had gone to London first, or directly to Poland, or been kidnapped by Polish secret police. Mrs. Pekora came forward with testimony that destroyed Onufrejczyk's credibility. She told investigators Onufrejczyk had asked her to send parcels the size and shape of £450 in £1 notes by registered post, and to write letters in Sikut's handwriting, forgeries designed to create the impression Sikut was alive. Onufrejczyk had attempted to forge farm deed transfers, removing Sikut's name entirely. He had even tried to tamper with the blacksmith's testimony. Forensic investigators examined Kevin Hendra Farm and discovered more than 2,000 dark stains on the walls, ceiling, and passages from kitchen to farmyard. The majority were identified as human blood. They also recovered bone fragments. The kitchen where Onufrichik prepared his meals was a crime scene. The 12-day trial took place in November 1954 at Swansea Crown Court. Onufrichik claimed Cykut was alive and the bloodstains came from skinning rabbits and butchering farm animals. The jury did not believe him. They convicted him and he was sentenced to death. On appeal, Lord Chief Justice Lord Goddard delivered a landmark ruling. He wrote that the fact of death, like any other fact, can be proved by circumstantial evidence. He noted that legal thinking had evolved since the days of the Cwmdu Wonder, a 17th century case where 3 people were hanged only for supposed victim to reappear alive. Lord Goddard made clear that modern standards had moved beyond requiring a body, that juries could evaluate circumstantial evidence properly, and that murder could be proven through blood analysis, contradictory statements, and physical evidence even, when remains could not be recovered. The ruling in R v Onufrichik, 1955, 1 QB 388, became the foundational precedent for all no-body murder prosecutions in Britain. The death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment on January 24, 1955. Onufrichik was released in 1965 after 11 years, still protesting innocence. He reportedly returned to Cwmdu and asked locals if they had seen his old friend Cykut, shocking the community. In 1966, Michael Onufrichik was killed in a traffic accident in Bradford, Yorkshire, at age 71. He never admitted the murder or revealed what he had done with Cykut's remains. Stanislav Cykut's body has never been found. The £600 he invested in a partnership that was supposed to secure his future bought him nothing but an unmarked grave somewhere on a Welsh farm. His family had no body to bury, no funeral, no place to mourn. They had only the legal precedent established by his death, a precedent that told future killers that destroying a body would not destroy a case. The law had moved on. Circumstantial evidence was enough. The truth would find them regardless. Before we move on to the next case, make sure to subscribe if you're finding these stories as disturbing as I am. It helps us keep covering the cases that most channels won't touch. While Onufrichik disposed of his victim on his own property, the next killers made a catastrophic error that would unravel their entire plan. They targeted the wrong woman. Case 3. The Hossein Brothers. On December 29, 1969, 2 brothers forced their way into a home on Arthur Road in Wimbledon, London, and kidnapped a 55-year-old woman. They believed they had captured Anna Murdoch, wife of newspaper magnate Rupert Murdoch, and planned to demand a ransom of £1 million. They had followed the Murdoch company Rolls-Royce to the address and assumed the woman who lived there was their target. They were wrong. The woman they kidnapped was Muriel Mackay, wife of Alec Mackay, Rupert Murdoch's deputy chairman at News Limited. Muriel had been using the Rolls-Royce because Murdoch had loaned it to her husband while the Murdochs were in Australia. This case of mistaken identity would cost Muriel Mackay her life and leave her family searching for answers for more than 5 decades. Arthur Hussein was 34 years old, and his younger brother, Nizamuddin, was 22. They were Indo-Trinidadian immigrants living in England. Arthur worked as a tailor's cutter in Hackney and had borrowed heavily to purchase Rook's Farm, an 11-acre property in Stocking Pelham on the Hertfordshire-Essex border. He harboured grandiose ambitions of becoming a local squire and wanted to be seen as a man of wealth and status, but the reality was that he was drowning in debt. The farm was costing him far more than he could afford. Nizamuddin, described by some as a stranger in a strange land, had been living and working as a labourer at the farm since August 1969, entirely subordinate to his dominant elder brother who controlled every aspect of his life. Muriel Frida Mackay had been born on February 4, 1914 in Adelaide, Australia. She was 55 years old when she was kidnapped. She was married to Alec Mackay and they had moved to London in 1958 when Alec took up his position with Rupert Murdoch's News Limited. They lived at St Mary's House on Arthur Road in Wimbledon and had 3 adult children, Jennifer, Diane and Ian. On the evening of December 29th, when Alec returned home at 7:45, he found the front door standing open. The telephone had been ripped from the wall. A rusty meat cleaver lay on the floor. His wife's handbag contents were scattered across the stairs. Muriel was gone. The house showed clear signs of a violent struggle. Over the following 40 days, the brothers, identifying themselves only as M3 in phone calls and letters, made 18 phone calls and sent 3 ransom letters demanding £1 million. The communications were chilling in their detail. They enclosed 5 letters that had been written by Muriel herself, pleading with her family to comply with the demands and pay the ransom to save her life. They also enclosed 3 pieces cut from her clothing as proof they held her. The brothers attempted 2 ransom deliveries, but both failed. The first attempt collapsed because the brothers detected police presence at the drop-off location and fled. The second failed when a local couple spotted the unattended suitcases full of ransom money and, thinking they were suspicious, reported them to police before the brothers could collect them. Police investigators worked methodically to track down the kidnappers. They identified a blue Volvo with registration XG0994G that had been observed near both the Mackay residence in Wimbledon and the ransom drop-off point. The vehicle was traced directly to Rook's farm in Stocking Pelham. When forensic experts examined the ransom letters and a newspaper found at the Mackay crime scene, they found fingerprints that matched Arthur Hossain. Voice analysis experts compared recordings of the M3 phone calls with voice samples from Nizamuddin and found a match. On February 7, 1970, police raided Rook's farm and uncovered damning evidence, including a notebook with torn pages that matched exactly the paper Muriel's letters had been written on. Despite weeks of intensive searching across the 11-acre farm, no trace of Muriel was found. Investigators dug in multiple locations. They searched outbuildings, animal pens and fields. Speculation has centred on 2 possibilities: that her remains were fed to animals on the farm, or that she was buried somewhere on the property in a location that has never been identified. The trial began on September 14, 1970 at the Old Bailey, prosecuted by Attorney General Sir Peter Rawlinson himself, a sign of how serious the Crown considered the case. The trial lasted approximately 3.5 weeks. Both brothers pleaded not guilty to all charges. Each tried to blame the other for the kidnapping and murder. The evidence against them was overwhelming. On October 6, 1970, the jury found them guilty on all charges. Mr. Justice Sebag Shaw, in passing sentence, called their conduct cold-blooded and abominable. Arthur received life imprisonment for murder, 25 years for kidnapping, 14 years for blackmail, and 10 years for sending threatening letters, all to run concurrently. Nizamuddin received the same sentences, except 15 years for kidnapping. Arthur died in prison in 2009 at Ashworth Secure Hospital, having spent nearly 40 years incarcerated, without ever revealing where Muriel's body was located. Nizamuddin served approximately 20 years before being deported to Trinidad upon his release. In 2021, Nizamuddin told a QC hired by the Mackay family that Muriel had died of a heart attack shortly after the kidnapping, and that he had buried her wearing a green coat near a chicken shed on the farm. This was the first time either brother had provided any specific information about what happened to her. Multiple searches of Rook's farm have been conducted based on this information. A 2022 search using ground-penetrating radar found nothing. A July 2024 search also came up empty. In June 2025, the Mackay family, still desperate for answers, offered a £1 million reward for information leading to the recovery of Muriel's remains. In November 2025, the High Court formally declared Muriel legally dead, 56 years after her abduction. Alec Mackay, who died without ever learning what happened to his wife, once said, "I wish to God I knew what happened to my wife. All I want to know is where my wife has been buried so that I can go and place some flowers." Muriel Mackay's body has never been found. The brothers' catastrophic mistake in targeting the wrong woman did not save them from conviction, but it meant the Mackay family has endured more than 5 decades without being able to bury Muriel, without a grave to visit, without knowing where she lies. While the Hossain brothers kidnapped their victim in a case of mistaken identity, the next killer knew exactly who his target was: his own wife. Case 4. Russell Causley. Between June 11th and June 15th, 1985, a 40-year-old woman named Carol Packman disappeared from her home on Ipswich Road in Bournemouth. She lived there with her husband Russell Cawsley, who was 42 years old, and their 16-year-old daughter, Samantha. Approximately a year before Carol vanished, Russell had moved his mistress, Patricia Cawsley, directly into the family home. Carol had been consulting a divorce lawyer shortly before she disappeared. When Samantha and Russell returned home one day in mid-June, they found a short note on the kitchen table saying Carol had had enough and was going, with her wedding ring placed on top. No clothing was missing, no jewellery was taken, her passport remained in the house. From that day forward, no communication from Carol to any family member, friend or professional contact was ever received. Carol Packman has never been found. Russell Cawsley had been born as Russell Packman on April 10, 1943. He worked as an electronics and aviation engineer and ran an insurance business from the family home. After Carol disappeared, he changed his surname by deed poll to Cawsley, taking his mistress's surname. The sentencing judge described Cawsley as a man who bullied and dominated his wife for years. At a 2022 public parole hearing, Cawsley agreed that proven habitual liar was a fair assessment of himself. Cawsley's explanations kept changing. He claimed she had run off with a man in a red Porsche, a story no one who knew Carol believed. He told others she had gone to Canada, Germany or Malta. Over the years, he provided multiple conflicting confessions. He said he strangled her during an argument, struck her with a hammer, or gassed her under a plastic bag. He also claimed his mistress Patricia had killed her. At the 2022 parole hearing, he claimed he burned her body in the garden while Samantha was in the house and scattered her ashes in nearby hedges. None of these stories could be verified. The case was initially treated as a voluntary disappearance. Then, in 1993, 8 years after Carol vanished, Cawsley attempted to fake his own death by staging a man overboard incident off Guernsey in a hired yacht. Investigators discovered the fraud when passenger manifests revealed someone named Russell had bought a one-way ferry ticket back to the mainland. An £800,000 life insurance claim was filed within days. Cawsley and Patricia were traced to Brighton. He was convicted of insurance fraud in 1995 and jailed for 2 years, prompting Dorset police to reopen the murder investigation. The evidence that convicted Cawsley was entirely circumstantial but overwhelming. In 1994, while in custody for fraud, Cawsley confessed to police that he had killed Carol, then retracted it. More damning were confessions to 3 fellow inmates. Andrew Murphy at Ford Open Prison testified that Cawsley described striking Carol on the head with a hammer. The complete absence of any trace of Carol after June 1985 was powerful evidence. She had not used her bank account, contacted her daughter, or appeared anywhere under her own name. Cawsley had systematically erased her from his life, moving his mistress in, changing his surname, transferring the property title. He paid storage charges for Carol's belongings for 11 years, keeping her possessions as though she might return. At Winchester Crown Court on December 18, 1996, the jury found Russell Cawsley guilty of murder and sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 16 years. The judge described him as totally ruthless and calculated. He never gave evidence in his own defence. The conviction was overturned on appeal in 2003 after the Criminal Cases Review Commission discovered that Andrew Murphy had previously given similar confession evidence against another defendant and been rewarded with a reduced sentence, calling his credibility into question. At retrial in 2004 at Exeter Crown Court, Cawsley was convicted again. Cawsley's case became deeply entangled with debates about parole reform and no body, no parole legislation. He was granted parole and released in September 2020, having served 24 years. He was recalled to prison in late 2021 after breaching licence conditions by disappearing from his bail hostel overnight. In December 2022, his case became the subject of the first public parole hearing in UK history, held at HMP Lewes. The proceedings were broadcast to allow public scrutiny of parole decisions. Despite opposition from Carol's family, he was released again in February 2023, subject to lifelong supervision. Daughter Samantha Gillingham, who was 16 when her mother vanished, has described him as a total monster and called the parole board process a tick box exercise. She said, "I was gutted when he was released, He may have well just torn my heart out. Carol Packman's body has never been found. The note on the kitchen table and the wedding ring were the last traces of a woman who simply vanished, erased by a man who believed he could rewrite his life by destroying hers. Before we move on to the next case, make sure to subscribe if you're finding these stories as disturbing as I am. It helps us keep covering the cases that most channels won't touch. While Russell Causley's case became entangled with debates about parole reform, the next killer's conviction helped pioneer the use of DNA evidence in no-body murder cases. Case 5. Ian Sims. On February 9, 1988, a 22-year-old insurance clerk named Helen McCourt left work in Liverpool at just before 4 o'clock in the evening and called her mother Marie from the office. She asked for tea to be ready early because she planned to wash her hair before going out with her new boyfriend that evening. Helen was excited about this relationship. She had been seeing him for only a few weeks and they had plans to meet later. She departed her bus at approximately 5:15 and began the short walk home past the George and Dragon pub on Main Street in Billinge, Merseyside. Helen lived just yards from the pub. The walk should have taken minutes. She never arrived home. The tea her mother had prepared went cold on the table. The boyfriend waited for Helen to call. Within those few minutes, Helen McCourt vanished, and her body has never been found. Ian Sims was 31 years old and the landlord of the George and Dragon. He was married with 2 small children and presented as an ordinary family man to the community. But Sims was secretly conducting an affair with a 21-year-old woman he had moved into the pub flat while his wife remained at their family home. Helen McCourt had no intimate relationship with Sims. She had rejected his repeated sexual advances over several months, making it clear she was not interested. He also believed she knew about his secret affair and was gossiping about it in the community, threatening to expose the double life he was leading. 2 days before Helen disappeared, she had been involved in an argument at the pub, and witnesses heard Sims express intense hatred toward her, saying things that made people uncomfortable. Minutes after Helen got off the bus and began walking past the George and Dragon, a man waiting at a nearby bus stop heard a loud scream, as if stifled, as though someone had covered the person's mouth to muffle the sound. He looked toward the pub, but saw nothing unusual. Helen was never seen again. When Helen failed to come home, Marie immediately knew something was wrong. Her daughter was reliable, responsible, always called if plans changed. Marie contacted police that same evening. Within hours, a major investigation was launched. Detectives quickly focused on the George and Dragon pub, the last building Helen would have passed on her walk home. They executed a search warrant on the premises. Forensic evidence revealed what happened inside that pub. Helen was struck at least twice in the face at the outside door of Sims's flat above the pub. Blood was splashed on the wallpaper at the entry point, indicating a sudden violent attack. She was then dragged upstairs into the flat. Carpet fibres from 3 different rooms in Sims's flat were found on her clothing, showing she had been pulled through multiple areas of the residence. A length of electrical flex found with her discarded belongings contained strands of hair matching Helen's, caught in a knot, with canine tooth marks matching Sims's dog's. Investigators believed this was the ligature used to strangle her. Her body was never found, but her blood was detected in the boot of Sims's car, proving he had transported her remains. This case became one of the first in the UK to use DNA fingerprinting as prosecution evidence, a groundbreaking moment in forensic science. Blood samples from Helen's parents were compared against blood found at the scene. Initial testing showed odds of 126,000 to 1 that the blood belonged to a child of the McCourts. As DNA technology advanced during the investigation, that figure was later improved to 9 million to 1, making it nearly certain the blood was Helen's. An opal and pearl earring gifted to Helen by her mother for her 21st birthday was found in Sims's car boot. The butterfly clip from its matching pair was found embedded in his bedroom carpet. Helen's belongings, including her handbag, coat, scarf, trousers and underwear, were discovered in a bin liner 20 miles away in Earlham. The bin liner was proved to have come from a roll kept in Sims's pub. Also in the bag was a blood-stained jacket that both Sims's wife and mistress confirmed belonged to Sims. Fresh scratches were observed on Sims's neck when police first interviewed him, defensive wounds consistent with someone fighting for their life. Throughout the investigation, Sims's behaviour raised suspicion. He showed no concern for Helen's disappearance. He made no effort to help search for her. When questioned, he was evasive and defensive. As evidence mounted against him, his story kept changing, each version contradicting the last. At Liverpool Crown Court in March 1989, Sims was tried for murder. His defence was extraordinary and implausible. He claimed an elaborate frame-up, that an unknown intruder had entered the pub dressed in his clothes, murdered Helen, stolen his car to dispose of the body, and returned the vehicle, all without disturbing him or his Rottweiler guard dog. He suggested this phantom killer had planted evidence throughout his flat and car. The jury rejected this theory entirely. On March 14, 1989, Sims was convicted of murder. He received life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 16 years. He was eligible for parole from 2004, but was not released until February 2020, having served approximately 32 years. He maintained his innocence throughout every parole hearing, refusing to tell authorities where Helen's body was located. He died on June 24, 2022, aged 66, never revealing where Helen's body lay. Helen's mother, Marie McCourt, waged a decades-long campaign that changed British law. She lobbied tirelessly, meeting with MPs, appearing on television, writing letters, anything to ensure that killers who refused to disclose remains would face consequences. Her efforts culminated in Helen's Law, the Prisoners' Disclosure of Information About Victims, Act 2020, which requires the parole board to consider whether convicted killers have cooperated with inquiries about victim locations when assessing parole applications. The legislation received royal assent on November 4, 2020. Marie McCourt stated, "To lose a loved one is devastating. To lose a loved one to murder is horrific. To be denied their funeral causes unimaginable suffering." Upon Sims's death, she said, "It's a huge relief to me knowing that this man has finally been wiped off this earth." Marie received an MBE for services to families of murdered victims, recognition of her tireless work to help other families denied closure. In 2013, police exhumed a grave behind St Aidan's Church in Billinge following a tip-off, digging through the night in the hope of finally finding Helen. They found nothing. Helen McCourt's body has never been found. Her mother Marie died in August 2022, just 2 months after Sims, without ever being able to bury her daughter. The woman who had washed her hair before going out that February evening in 1988 remains missing. Somewhere only Ian Sims knew, and he took that secret to his grave. While Ian Sims's conviction used pioneering DNA evidence to prove murder despite no body, the next killer left his victim's blood in a borrowed car he thought he had cleaned. Case 6. Glyn Razzle. On Tuesday, March 19, 2002, a 41-year-old learning support assistant named Linda Razzle left home in Swindon, running late for work. She dropped off her boyfriend Greg Worrell in Highworth, then took her children to school before parking her red Ford Escort on Alvescott Road. She began walking along an alleyway towards Swindon College where she worked. A witness saw her in the alley. She never arrived at work. Linda Razzle has never been seen again. Her estranged husband, Glyn Razzle, approximately 42 to 43 years old, was a former investment banker living in Crewkerne, Somerset. He had met Linda Davies on a train in 1979. They married and settled near Swindon, having 4 children. Their marriage collapsed in 1998 when Linda began an affair. The divorce became bitter. Linda twice accused Glyn of physical assault. Juries acquitted him both times. On March 15, 2002, just 4 days before Linda vanished, she obtained a court order freezing all of Glyn's finances. This was a devastating blow. The timing was significant. On the day Linda disappeared, Glyn was not driving his own vehicle. He had swapped cars with a friend 24 hours earlier on March 18th, claiming he needed the friend's Renault Laguna for a planned day trip to France. This car swap, made the day before Linda disappeared, would prove crucial. Greg Worrell reported Linda missing that evening. Police identified Glyn as a person of interest, given the bitter divorce and frozen finances. They searched the Renault Laguna twice within days. Both times, they found nothing. The car was returned to its owner, who cleaned it thoroughly. Then police searched the car a third time, examining areas not visible during casual inspection. They found spots of blood on the underside of the parcel shelf in the boot, on the sides of the boot, on the tops of the rear seats, and on the front passenger footmat. DNA testing confirms the blood belonged to Linda Rozelle. CCTV footage showed Glyn wearing clothes that did not match what he told police he was wearing that morning. His alibi was a 2-hour walk alone that no one could verify. 2 cameras on his claimed route were not recording. A third camera was recording, but police did not seize the tape promptly. By the time they requested it, the tape had been reused, destroying any potential evidence. Linda's mobile phone was found in a recess of the alleyway near where she had parked, the last place she was seen alive. From March 19, 2002 onward, there was no bank activity, phone use, sightings, or contact with friends, family, or her children. Glyn Rozelle was arrested on May 15, 2002. At Bristol Crown Court on November 14, 2003, the jury found Glyn Rozelle guilty of murder and sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 16 years. His defence was that he went for a 2-hour walk that morning and had nothing to do with Linda's disappearance. Later, his defence team suggested the blood may have been planted by corrupt police, or that Linda staged her own disappearance to frame him. None of these theories were supported by evidence. Rozelle has filed multiple appeals. Every one has been rejected. A 2018 BBC documentary examined the case, with Inside Justice conducting an independent review. They concluded the bloodstains had been present from the beginning, had not been planted, and the conviction was sound. In October 2021, Glyn Rozelle became the first prisoner in England refused parole specifically under Helen's Law, legislation requiring parole boards to consider whether a convicted killer has cooperated with inquiries about the victim's location. Rozelle has never revealed where Linda's body is. In August 2023, his case became one of the first public parole hearings in UK history. He was asked 3 times whether he killed his wife. Each time he replied, "I didn't kill Linda Rozelle." He conceded she must be dead after more than 20 years missing, but the parole board called this half-hearted and refused release, stating, "There is ample evidence that Mr. Rozelle is capable of wholesale deceit." In February 2019, police searched a field in Highworth following a tip-off. They found nothing. Linda Rozelle's body has never been found. Glyn Rozelle remains in an open prison, now approximately 66 years old. The frozen bank accounts that triggered Linda's disappearance were never unfrozen. The divorce Glyn was desperate to avoid was completed in the only way it could be, with Linda declared legally dead and Glyn spending the rest of his life in prison. Before we move on to the next case, make sure to subscribe if you're finding these stories as disturbing as I am. It helps us keep covering the cases that most channels won't touch. While Glyn Rozelle's conviction rested on DNA blood evidence found in a car, the next killer in Scotland arranged for someone else to commit the murder, believing that distance would protect him. Case 7. Nat Fraser. On Tuesday, April 28, 1998, a 33-year-old woman named Arlene Fraser waved her children off to school from the doorway of 2 Smith Street, New Elgin, Scotland. She was wearing her dressing gown. Her son Jamie was 10 years old and her daughter Natalie was 5. It was a normal Tuesday morning. Arlene's last known contact with anyone was at 9:41 in the morning when she phoned the children's school. At 9:51, the school rang back. No one answered. She failed to attend an 11 o'clock meeting with a friend. When Jamie and Natalie returned from school that afternoon, the house was empty. Uneaten lunches sat prepared on the counter, sandwiches she had made for them that morning. A bicycle lay on its side in the yard. A vacuum cleaner was still plugged in, as though she had been interrupted mid-task. Washing hung on the line, drying in the Scottish breeze. Their mother was gone. Arlene Fraser has never been found. Arlene's estranged husband Nathaniel Fraser, known as Nat, was approximately 38 to 39 years old. He was a prominent fruit and vegetable wholesaler in Elgin Moray, outwardly charming and successful in business. But beneath that public persona was a documented history of domestic violence against Arlene that had escalated over the years. She had fled to a women's refuge twice, in 1990 and 1992, trying to escape him and keep herself safe. He once told a friend something that revealed his possessive nature. If you are not going to live with me, you are not going to be living with anyone. Just 5 weeks before Arlene disappeared, Nat had strangled her until she lost consciousness. And attack so severe it led to criminal charges. He was later charged with attempted murder, though the charge was ultimately reduced to assault. Arlene and Nat had separated in March 1998, just weeks before she vanished. On the morning of April 28th, she had a scheduled appointment with a divorce solicitor to discuss finalising the end of their marriage. Nat Fraser did not kill Arlene himself. The prosecution established that he arranged for a hitman to do it, reportedly paying £15,000 for the contract killing. His former best friend Hector Dick testified that Fraser told him he had arranged for his estranged wife to be killed, and that her body had been burned, her teeth had been ground up, and nothing would ever be found. This confession to Dick would become the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. The investigation became the largest Grampian police had ever conducted, collecting over 1,000 witness statements and pursuing hundreds of leads. Key evidence included Dick's testimony about Fraser's confession and the suspicious purchase of a beige Ford Fiesta the night before Arlene's disappearance. The car was later burned and crushed, destroying any potential forensic evidence it might have contained. Fraser had constructed what investigators called a too-perfect alibi, involving pre-arranged phone calls designed to place him elsewhere when Arlene disappeared. All of Arlene's personal effects were left behind at the house: contact lenses she needed to see clearly, medication for her Crohn's disease that she took daily, her passport, everything. There was complete absence of any financial activity or sightings after 9:41 that morning. Fraser made a televised press appeal for information about his missing wife, standing before cameras and asking the public for help. But observers noted he appeared surprisingly unperturbed and even cracked jokes about the disappearance during the appeal. This behaviour struck investigators as profoundly wrong, as inappropriate for a man whose wife and the mother of his children had vanished without a trace. Fraser was first convicted on January 29, 2003 at Edinburgh High Court and sentenced to life with a minimum of 25 years. Lord Mackay described him as evil when passing sentence. However, in May 2011, the UK Supreme Court unanimously quashed the conviction due to non-disclosure of evidence about Arlene's rings, which had mysteriously disappeared from the family home and then reappeared. The defence argued this evidence should have been disclosed to them before trial, and the Supreme Court agreed. At retrial beginning April 23, 2012, Fraser was convicted again by majority verdict on May 30, 2012, after the jury deliberated for 5 hours. Lord Brackadale imposed life with a minimum of 17 years, accounting for time already served in prison. He described the murder as shocking and wicked and cold-blooded and premeditated, stating, "You instigated in cold blood the premeditated murder of your wife and mother of your children, then aged 10 and 5 years." Fraser remains incarcerated at HMP Addywell, West Lothian. Now approximately 65 years old, he will be eligible for parole in October 2028, at which point he will have served 30 years. He has never admitted guilt and continues to maintain his innocence. Arlene's sister Carol Gillies has stated publicly, "Tell us where her remains are or go back to your cell." She actively campaigned for Suzanne's Law, passed in Scotland in September 2025, which requires the Scottish Parole Board to consider a killer's refusal to disclose remains when deciding on release. This law will apply directly to Fraser's 2028 parole hearing. The 2012 retrial was filmed for Channel 4's documentary The Murder Trial, which won Best Single Documentary at the 2014 BAFTA Television Awards, bringing unprecedented public attention to the case and to the issue of no-body murders. Arlene Fraser's body has never been found. Her children grew up without knowing where their mother lies, without a grave to visit, without the closure that comes from a funeral. And Nat Fraser continues to maintain his innocence from behind prison walls. While Nat Fraser hired someone to kill his wife and created an elaborate alibi, the next killer waited 46 years before being brought to justice for a double murder that destroyed 2 generations of a family. Case 8. William McDowell. On Friday, November 12, 1976, a 36-year-old woman named Renee McRae left her home in Cradle Hall Park in Inverness, Scotland, with both of her sons. She dropped her elder son Gordon, aged 9, at her estranged husband's house, as planned for the weekend. But she kept her younger son Andrew, aged 3, with her in the car. She told people she was driving to visit her sister in Kilmarnock, a story that seemed perfectly reasonable for a Friday evening. But a friend later revealed the truth. She was actually heading to Perthshire to meet her secret lover for a weekend together. That evening, a witness near the Dalmagary lay-by on the A9, 12 miles south of Inverness, heard a blood-curdling scream piercing the Highland darkness. A train driver spotted Renee's BMW ablaze in the lay-by, flames consuming the vehicle. Neither Renee nor 3-year-old Andrew has ever been seen again. Their bodies have never been found. The secret lover Renee was meeting that night was William David McDowell, known as Bill. He was 34 years old, an accountant and company secretary at Hugh McRae Builders Limited, the building firm owned by Renee's estranged husband, Gordon McRae. This meant McDowell worked directly for the husband of the woman he was sleeping with, a situation that required constant deception. McDowell was married with 2 children of his own. He had been conducting a 4-year affair with Renee, meeting her in secret, building a relationship that he kept hidden from everyone in his life. 3-year-old Andrew was not Gordon McRae's son, though Gordon had raised him as his own. Andrew was biologically McDowell's child, conceived during the affair. McDowell faced exposure of both the affair and his fatherhood, revelations that would cost him his job, his family, and his home. The prosecution would argue that this fear of exposure was his motive for double murder. Blood matching Renee's was found inside the burned-out BMW, along with a blood-stained rug. Witnesses reported seeing a man dragging something resembling a dead sheep near the lay-by that evening. Renee had been wearing a sheepskin coat when she left home. Another witness saw a man with a pushchair near Dalmagary Quarry. 2 days after the disappearance, McDowell removed and burned the boot floor from his company Volvo and refused to return the vehicle to the company until he had finished scrubbing it out, behaviour that investigators found deeply suspicious. Evidence also emerged that McDowell had offered a man named Dennis Tyranny £500 to kill Renee and Andrew in an acid attack, though Tyranny had refused. The prosecution argued, life for Bill McDowell would change dramatically if it all came out in the open. He would lose his job, his family, and his home. Everything he had built would crumble if the affair and Andrew's true parentage became known. The case became Scotland's longest-running missing persons investigation, spanning more than 4 decades. A 1977 excavation of Dalmagary Quarry was halted due to lack of funds before it could be completed. A 2004 cold case review spent £122,000 excavating 20,000 tonnes of earth and removing 2,000 trees from the area, finding only crisp packets and rabbit bones. In 2019, a major operation drained Leenock Quarry near Culloden Battlefield, removing over 100,000 tonnes of material in a massive effort to find the bodies. Pieces of a pushchair were found, but no human remains. McDowell was finally arrested in September 2019 in Cumbria, 43 years after the murders. The trial began September 12, 2022, at the High Court in Inverness, before Lord Armstrong. McDowell was 80 years old by this point, arriving each day in a wheelchair, frail and elderly. His defence lodged alibis and attempted to incriminate Gordon McRae instead, suggesting that Gordon had killed his wife and child rather than McDowell. Defence counsel told the jury, Bill McDowell has suffered 45 years of suspicion. He is now a dying man. The jury of 8 women and 7 men deliberated for approximately 5 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all 3 counts on September 29, 2022. Lord Armstrong imposed life imprisonment with a minimum 30 years, a sentence McDowell would never live to complete. He stated, "These murders appear to have been premeditated, planned, and carried out by you in the most calculating way. These appear to have been, in effect, executions." Renee's sister, Morag Govans, spoke outside the court, saying, "Almost 46 years on, the pain of losing Renee and Andrew in such a cruel and brutal fashion never fades. If he has a shred of decency in his body, he will now reveal where they both lie." William McDowell died on February 15, 2023, less than 6 months into his sentence, without ever admitting to the murders or revealing where the bodies were hidden. He took that secret to his grave. The bodies of Renee McRae and her 3-year-old son Andrew have never been found. Gordon McRae, now in his 50s, lost his mother and half-brother when he was 9 years old and has never been able to bury either of them. Before we move on to the next case, make sure to subscribe if you're finding these stories as disturbing as I am. It helps us keep covering the cases that most channels won't touch. While William McDowell took 46 years and the secret of where he hid 2 bodies to his grave, the next killer's methodical planning and cadaver dog evidence would lead to conviction even without remains. Case 9. David Gilroy. On May 4th, 2010, a 38-year-old bookkeeper named Suzanne Pilley left her home in Edinburgh to go to work at Infrastructure Managers Limited, a company that oversaw private finance initiative projects. CCTV cameras captured her leaving Sainsbury's at St Andrew Square at 8:51 in the morning. Another camera caught her at 8:54 on North St David Street, approximately 20 metres from her office on Thistle Street in Edinburgh's city centre. She was carrying her handbag and walking toward work like she did every weekday morning. She was never seen again on any camera. She never arrived at the office. Suzanne Pilley vanished in those final 20 metres and her body has never been found. David Gilroy was 47 years old and Suzanne's boss. He was the Scottish Regional Operations Manager at Infrastructure Managers Limited. He was married to Andrea Gilroy with 2 children, living in Silvernose Bray, Edinburgh. He was a former Royal Navy veteran who had served for 11 years with very good character assessments throughout his service. Police would later describe him as very highly regarded as a problem solver, who treated Suzanne's murder as another problem to be solved. Gilroy and Suzanne had been conducting what witnesses described as a turbulent on-off affair that began on a staff night out. By early May 2010, Suzanne was ending the relationship. She had started seeing someone new. Gilroy could not accept this. In the month before she vanished, he sent her over 400 text messages. On some days, he texted her more than 50 times. He was obsessive, controlling, unable to let go. He had once hidden her mobile phone for 3 weeks to punish her for something. The prosecution established what happened that morning. Gilroy killed Suzanne in the basement storeroom of the IML offices on Thistle Street, somewhere between 8:54 when she was last seen on camera and 9 o'clock when she should have arrived at her desk. He concealed her body in a recess in the basement. Later that day, he loaded her body into the boot of his silver Vauxhall Vectra. That evening, he attended his daughter's school presentation and had dinner with his wife Andrea, ordering mushroom risotto, while Suzanne's body was believed to be in the car boot in the car park. The following day, he made a supposed business trip to Loch Gilphead in Argyll. The journey took him 2 hours longer each way than the normal route. His vehicle showed 124 unaccounted miles on the odometer. Police believe he buried Suzanne's body somewhere in the Argyll Forest area, near the Rest and Be Thankful Pass, a vast expanse of wilderness where a body could remain hidden indefinitely. Specially trained cadaver dogs from South Yorkshire Police were brought to Edinburgh. The dogs identified areas of interest in the IML basement and in Gilroy's car boot, indicating the presence of human remains in both locations. Forensic examination revealed curved scratches on Gilroy's hands, a cut on his forehead, and bruises on his chest, all consistent with injuries sustained during a violent struggle, specifically the kind of defensive injuries that occur when someone is being strangled and fighting back. The scratches had been covered with a makeup-like substance, an attempt to conceal them. His car had 3 fractured coil springs, damage consistent with carrying a heavy load. Vegetative matter on the vehicle indicated it had been driven off-road in a rural area. All contact between Gilroy's and Suzanne's phones ceased on May 4th, 2010, the day she disappeared. There was no bank activity, no credit card use, no phone use after that morning. No arrangements had been made for her pet cat and fish, animals she cared for daily. Gilroy was arrested on June 23, 2010. The trial began February 20th, 2012, at the High Court of Justiciary in Edinburgh, before Lord Brackadale, prosecuted by Advocate Depute Alex Prentice QC. The defence lasted only half a day. Gilroy declined to testify in his own defence, choosing to remain silent throughout. The jury deliberated for 2.5 days before returning a guilty verdict by majority on March 15, 2012. On April 18, 2012, in the first murder sentencing ever filmed for same-day broadcast in the UK, Lord Brackadale imposed life imprisonment with a minimum of 18 years. He described Gilroy's disposal of the body as showing quite chilling calmness and noted, "It seems that you are the only person who knows where her body is." The filming of the sentencing was a groundbreaking moment in British legal history, allowing the public to see justice being delivered. Suzanne's mother, Sylvia Pilley, stated after the conviction, "We will never move on. We are just in the same place." Her father, Robert Pilley, died in February 2019 without learning what happened to his daughter, without ever being able to bury her. Sister Gail Fairgrieve said in 2020, "For the past decade, we have lived in a state of limbo, waiting for the news that Suzanne's body had been found. Multiple appeals have been rejected, including challenges reviewed by the Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission and the UK Supreme Court. Gilroy was attacked on his first day at HMP Shotts by other inmates, suffering a broken jaw. He has never admitted guilt. His parole eligibility date is 2030. When he appears before the parole board, Scotland's Suzanne's Law, named after his victim and passed in September 2025, will apply. The law requires the Scottish Parole Board to consider a killer's refusal to disclose remains when deciding on release. Suzanne Pilley's body has never been found. Police searched over 400 square miles of Argyll Forest, gathered CCTV from 250 locations and took 1,164 witness statements. They found nothing. Somewhere in the Scottish Highlands, in a location known only to David Gilroy, Suzanne Pilley lies buried, while her family waits for answers he will not give. While David Gilroy disposed of one victim's body in the Scottish wilderness, the next killer dismembered 2 women and scattered their remains across London, keeping their heads, hands and feet as trophies he would never reveal. Case 10. John Sweeney. John Patrick Sweeney was born on October 13, 1956, in Kirkdale, Liverpool. He was a trained carpenter and joiner. By his early 30s, he had been married twice and divorced twice. In 1982, his first wife found him hiding in a wardrobe at their marital home, holding a hammer and an axe, a disturbing preview of the violence he was capable of. After moving to London, he developed a pattern of extreme violence against women that would eventually claim at least 2 lives, and potentially more. Police would describe him as one of the most dangerous men in Britain. Melissa Halstead was approximately 33 years old when she died. She was an American former fashion model and freelance photographer from Oakwood, near Dayton, Ohio. She met Sweeney in late 1986 in London on a photography set where he was employed as a carpenter. Their relationship was violent from the beginning. Sweeney was arrested 3 times for domestic violence against her in 1987 and 1988. In November 1988 in Vienna, he fractured her skull with a hammer. Despite this violence, they eventually settled in Amsterdam together. Melissa was last heard from on November 2, 1989, when she left a birthday message on her mother's answering machine. On May 3, 1990, police in Rotterdam recovered a naked female torso from a canal in a kit bag. The head, hands and legs had been removed. The body remained unidentified for 18 years until familial DNA matched it to Melissa's family in Ohio in 2008. Paula Fields was 31 years old, originally from Liverpool. She had moved to London in 1998. After her 3 children were taken into care, she became a crack cocaine addict and worked as a sex worker in North London. She met Sweeney, who was living under the alias Scouse Joe, in approximately November 2000. She was last seen on December 15, 2000, visiting his flat at Digby Crescent, Finsbury Park. On February 19, 2001, 2 boys fishing in Regent's Canal near King's Cross found holdalls containing her body, cut into 10 separate pieces and weighted with bricks. Her head, hands and feet were never recovered. The breakthrough in linking both murders came through Delia Balmer, an Australian nurse whom Sweeney held hostage at gunpoint in Camden in November 1994. During a 4-day ordeal, he confessed to killing Melissa in Amsterdam. After Balmer escaped, Sweeney was arrested but released on bail. On December 22, 1994, he ambushed Balmer with an axe and knife in a brutal attack. She survived only because a neighbour hit Sweeney with a baseball bat. Sweeney went on the run for 6 years, He was arrested on March 23, 2001 at a building site in Holborn, working under a false name. Police found a loaded 9mm Luger in his work locker. At his flat, they discovered 2 loaded sawn-off shotguns, a machete, an axe, cable ties, a garrote, and a killer's kit bag containing saws, knives, rubber gloves, and tape. Most critically, they seized over 300 drawings and poems, violent, macabre works that named his victims. One painting featured Melissa's gravestone. Under ultraviolet light, it read, R.I.P. Melissa Halstead, born on 12th December, 56. A lottery scratch card bore a verse that became infamous. Poor old Melissa, / chopped up in bits, / food to feed fish, / Amsterdam was the pits. The 5-week trial at the Old Bailey concluded on April 4, 2011, prosecuted by Brian Altman, QC. The defence claimed coincidence and suggested 2 other serial killers, Anthony Hardy and Frank Gust, might be responsible. Sweeney called his artwork nonsense and denied everything. The jury convicted him of both murders. On April 26, 2011, Mr. Justice Saunders imposed a whole life tariff, meaning Sweeney will never be released. Sweeney refused to attend the sentencing hearing. The judge stated, "The mutilation of the bodies is a serious aggravating feature. Not only does it reveal the cold-blooded nature of the killer, but it has added greatly to the distress of the families to know that parts of their loved ones have never been recovered." Paula's sister Irene Allagreen said in her victim impact statement, "She has been referred to as a prostitute, but to us, she was our baby sister. The person who did this should be made to explain the location of the body parts by law. Not understanding where or why is torture every day." Police continue investigating potential further victims across Europe, including 3 unidentified decapitated women found in Dutch canals, featured in Interpol's 2023 Operation Identify Me. The heads, hands and feet of both Melissa Halstead and Paula Fields have never been recovered. John Sweeney, now 68 years old, remains in prison where he will die. He has never revealed where he disposed of the missing body parts, leaving both families unable to fully bury their loved ones. The man known as the Scalp Hunter took those secrets with him into a cell he will never leave. If you enjoyed this deep dive into UK killers whose victims were never found, make sure to subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.